Good evening and a warm welcome to the second hour of The Globe on SABC News, coming to you from Johannesburg. I'm Simpiwe Ngwana. Thanks for joining us.
Indeed, thank you for joining us. I'm Lulu Gabu, and a very good evening to you. Onto our top story. Africa is finally realizing the dreams of its greatest leaders. That's according to President Cyril Ramaphosa, speaking about the formation of the world's largest trade bloc.
He says Jomo Kenyatta, Kwame Nkrumah and Julius Nyerere would be proud of the African Continental Free Trade Agreement. Ramaphosa was speaking during an exclusive interview with the SABC on the sidelines of the AU meeting in Niger.
Well, the coming into effect of the Africa Free Trade Area Agreement basically means that Africa is fulfilling the dream that was crafted by the founders of the OAU more than 60 years ago, when they conceptualized the formation of an integrated Africa. Then they wanted to see an Africa that is united, that is integrated, that is going to work as an economic bloc. This time round, we were able to fulfill that dream that the likes of Julius Nyerere, Kwame Nkrumah, Jomo Kenyatta had in mind when they formed the OAU, which is now the African Union. We were able this time round to form this common market, a mighty market which encompasses 55 countries, which will have a population span of 1.2 billion people on the African continent, but more importantly, which will cover a GDP of $3.2 trillion, where African countries will, for the first time, be able to trade amongst themselves much more effectively, competitively, but at the same time reaping the benefits of a free tariff area in their own continent. This is going to catapult the economies of many African countries, and this is where South Africa stands to gain a great deal, because we are then, as the industrial powerhouse of the continent, going to be able to reap the benefits of this Africa Free Trade Area Agreement, the various African markets, with their products, with their services, knowing that those products can penetrate various markets on a tariff-free basis or near tariff-free basis. And so we will be able to compete with products that come from other continents on a quality basis, on a price basis, and on an accessibility basis. But the other important derivative or byproduct of this agreement is that it is going to be an enabler, a game changer in many ways. An enabler in the sense that it is going to get Africa to be much more serious about infrastructure. Because in order for the products to move, to be accessible, we will need roads, we will need railroads, the airwaves must be opened. And as products are able to be traded around, companies are going to be demanding, they are going to be requiring that infrastructure must be put in place. So all these things are going to move in tandem, enabling Africa to accede to the highest level of economic integration. And by the way, this is going to be the largest market, single market in the world, where we are going to be able to have so many people at one go among so many countries being able to trade with one another. So it is a historic day. It's a great fulfillment of the dreams that were crafted by our forebears. And this, for us, has been a proud moment that we, South Africa, who were the pariahs of the world, who were the one country that destabilized the continent, are now able to be part of this. So for us as South Africans, apart from what we are going to gain in being part of this market, it's a great, great opportunity, because through this we are confirming that We are a member of the nations of Africa. We are respected as one of those, and we are accepted as one of those. Another highlight moment was when Nigeria finally signed to the Free Trade Area Agreement after their own ratification. That was hugely applauded because Nigeria, being the huge single market in our continent, was awaited. So when you have Nigeria and you have Egypt and you have Kenya and you have South Africa, then you've got the powerhouses, economic powerhouses of the continent. And those are now going to get the continent to move forward. Great day indeed for us.
And to talk to us about the significance of the free trade agreement, we're joined via Skype by economist David Owiro. A very good evening to you, Mr. Owiro. Thank you so much for joining us. Now, this free trade area has been met with so much praise, but do you think it is actually a good idea?
Yes, thank you for having me. Yes, it is a good idea to have this. Any effort that African nations take to reduce trade barriers such as tariffs and non-tariff barriers is a positive one for not only achieving more trade, but also using it as an enabler for achieving economic development. So certainly this is laudable for the leadership in Africa, and it certainly augurs well for economic development on the continent.
What are some of the biggest advantages? I mean, infrastructure challenges still remain, and little has been said about how these will be dealt with.
Yes, certainly Africa faces a lot of challenges, beginning from, the very numerous checkpoints and, customs, different customs practices, to non-trade barriers, just difficulty in general cross-border trade between African countries. And so it is hoped that when this is operational, that actually when you have a single customs territory, you have less of this discohesion, so you have more harmony in our, broader trading framework, so that people at least have reliability and stability in terms of knowing what custom taxes apply and what procedures indeed do apply. And so, the hope is that in spite of the challenges that exist, the coming in of this framework together with the infrastructure development that is taking place on the continent might actually lead to greater intra-African trade, which is what we all want.
I mean, having spoken of, harmony at the various trade pacts on the continent, the agreement is aimed at creating a single market for goods, and of course with the free movement of business people and investment, and with the myriad of terrorist and militant attacks at different parts of the continent. Do you think this kind of agreement will thrive?
Well, we know the security situation isn't the best that could be there. But one thing that we do know is that the security conflicts emerge from one of economic contestations. And so at the moment we have a framework that perhaps enhances people's economic situations and makes lives better for individuals, perhaps this contestation might actually augur well for the future of security and stability within Africa. And so if you look at security from a standpoint of, laying a groundwork of perhaps economic prosperity, we know that this might actually lead to better security outcomes. But nonetheless, Africa also cannot fold its arms and, be sort of resigned to the fact that, we have conflicts and therefore we cannot move forward in our aspirations. I think that would be the wrong approach. And so in spite of the security challenges, it's only best if nations within Africa do indeed pursue and put in place policies that advance their own economic prosperity, such as this one.
For centuries, European countries and more recently China have been stripping the continent of its own, natural resources. So could this mean that Africa can now reclaim its right to its own mineral resources? I mean, will the current status quo continue?
Well, we have some, of course, economic momentum already going on in terms of trying to diversify the trading outputs and the export profiles of African nations. This has been espoused from the AU's Agenda 2063 all the way down to the regional economic blueprints that the individual countries are pursuing. And so the hope is that African nations can be able to not only diversify their own production, but diversify their export commodities so through value addition and modernization of the agricultural sector, so that they can have less reliance on raw commodity exports. And so if having this framework will lead to greater intra-Africa trade as is envisaged, we know that Africa, our value add within Africa is actually traded most amongst ourselves. And so if intra-African trade currently stands at 18% and that grows even to 30%, that will actually mean a doubling of our manufacturing class. And so that will be quite significant for not only in terms of wealth creation, but also creating employment opportunities for our young population.
Now, Eritrea being the only country that hasn't signed, what will convince them to sign this deal?
Well, the issues about signing, of course, there have been, various worries here and there, and these tend to be mostly domestic. And we know signing on to this CFTA is largely political decisions that the leadership of these countries hold. And so there's generally a fear amongst smaller nations that, when you're in a trading bloc with larger nations, you run the risk of, putting your production or your local domestic manufacturing at risk, and that you might be overrun by these bigger economies. But one thing that I might say, that is a bit positive is even in situations where a small partner is entering into a preferential trading arrangement with a bigger economic partner, economics has sort of shown us that the two are still able to coexist, and they're able to achieve comparative advantage due to the various specializations that they can enter into, and that might result as a result of that trading framework. And so perhaps these fears are largely assuaged, but ultimately this remains to be political decisions of which the local leadership have to make ultimately in the end.
David, making it easier to trade goods through Africa for Africans will also open the world further to the buying power of Africans. Just how will such a purchasing power be affected?
I think it's going to be quite significant. If you look at the size of the African market, we're talking about 3 to 4 trillion economy with a very large population of 1.2 billion people. And so this is quite significant when you take into account also the rising incomes that we've seen a lot of African economies moving into the lower middle income category. And so this, of course, will translate to not only consumption power, but also to just increase disposable incomes in people's pockets. And so anyone who's looking to trade with Africa, of course, this is quite an opportunity. On the other hand, also, in terms of the investment attractiveness of Africa, this is going to be, will move in quite a positive direction, because you not only have a predictable framework, but there will be a lot of cohesion in terms of our trading framework, as well as, reliability in terms of policies that are put in place, which is something that the business community values greatly.
All right, David, thank you so much for your time. We appreciate it. That was Africa trade consultant and economist David Owiro joining us via Skype. This is The Globe on SABC News. We'll have more in just a moment.